chat.
If you've ever said, "That's not what I meant," then this episode is for you. Learning to express ourselves isn't just about trying to be polite, and it's really not just trying to get our point across. Our goal needs to be to strengthen our relationship and strengthen our communication. Our goal needs to be to express ourselves, actually bring the best out in the person and really trying to articulate what we mean.
Yeah. So this is the companion episode, the flip side episode of our last episode, Clumsy Conversations. Today, we're going to be talking about if you're somebody who struggles to communicate clearly or who finds yourself in this pattern of saying things in a clumsy way or saying things in a way you don't really intend. We're going to get practical and work on how we can start to strengthen this muscle and bring about the meaning that we're actually trying to share when we're communicating with our partner. So this is about if you are that clumsy conversationer.
Great. So if you're new here, welcome to Honey, We Need to Chat, the podcast all about communication in a relationship. I'm Blair. This is my wife, Amy. We've been married for over 10 years now. We have 4 kids and a golden retriever that loves a gate crash but loves a cuddle. So we enjoy her sometimes.
Yeah.
It's actually been really sweet this morning, or not this morning, for the last week now. Our kids have learned to make coffees and they love to make us coffees first thing in the morning, even sometimes wake us up to see if we're ready for a coffee. Now that's an experience. It's nice and not at the same time.
It'd be different if they were holding the coffee as they came in. I think that would like soften the blow, but because they're not.
Yeah. It's just like, well, you don't even have a coffee. Why are you waking
Funny
me up?
because you actually sent our oldest to ask me that this morning.
We had to get ready. It was a timing
He's
thing.
like, Daddy told me to ask this.
Yeah, because I was trying to get you up. Amy's been sleeping in with our toddler recently. We've just been having some sleep issues. So we're going to try and work through sleep training this weekend, actually, because it's becoming a real issue.
It is.
Yeah, difficult times, but fun times.
But yes, the coffee making has been amazing. We were all chilling. It was lazy afternoon yesterday, chilling in our room, watching a movie, kind of napping and whatever. And our oldest turns to Blair and is like, "Would you like a flat white?"
Yeah.
It was just such a weird experience.
I was like, yes.
Yes, I would.
Yeah, I really would. Thank you.
So train your kids to make coffees, guys.
Yeah. If you're a regular on this episode and you want to help us out, please just do the basics, guys. Just take 2 minutes right now. Like, share, subscribe. We see you guys there. We would just love your support. If you could get onto that like button, if that's all you do, that would be absolutely amazing. But please like, share, subscribe, comment even if you're feeling fancy.
Yeah.
And that would help us out in a big way.
If you're feeling fancy. Yeah. Yes. It does sometimes feel like we're talking to ourselves, even though we see you there. So we want to hear from you as well. We would love that. So many of us are not unfamiliar with saying things in a way we didn't intend. A lot of us kind of find ourselves after the fact in a conversation or in an argument or in a situation where we're like, "Oh, I really, really did not mean for it to come out that way. And that's not my intention." But then it becomes another layer on its own. And we have this conversation all the time. So this conversation is very relevant to us as well. Saying things in a way we don't mean. And then that adds a whole other story to it. So we're not unfamiliar with this. This is a common thing. But the good news is that you can actually strengthen the way you communicate. You can strengthen your muscle of communication and working on how things come out of your mouth and the situation that kind of unfolds when you're having these conversations. So that's what we want to talk about today. We want to get really, really practical with that. And we've got some really practical tips to help you strengthen those skills at the end of the episode. So stick around for that because we will get real. We will get real about them. But there's a number of reasons, and it's a similar conversation to last episode. There's a number of reasons why somebody may find it hard to communicate well when they're trying to express something about how they're feeling or trying to respond to something. And a lot of that comes down to how we were taught to communicate. So a lot of us were taught to communicate in a way that was avoidant or a way that was, passive aggressive, these kinds of things that didn't tell us how to gently approach the things that we're feeling serious about, and instead kind of built these patterns of exploding sarcasm, passive aggressivity, and little jabs as kind of an avoidant way of communicating instead of getting okay with being uncomfortable and saying what we need. So a lot of us grew up in patterns that are unhelpful for this. That's one reason why you might find yourself regularly saying things in a way you didn't mean for it to come out. Another is when we're trying to be honest, it's a really vulnerable experience. And so depending again on how you've been raised and depending on the vibe of your relationship, when you're trying to express something about how you're feeling, or you're trying to raise something that you understand might make the other person feel really vulnerable, it is an uncomfortable thing. And so the easy option is to not get real serious about it and say it very clearly. The easy option feels at the time to say it in a way that's a roundabout. And that often is not the best way, because it then causes more complications like we've spoken about. Sometimes, and this is a really big thing for I think most people, when you go to communicate these things, because of how complicated it is and layered it is, our nervous system actually sets us up for failure, because even though we might have the intention to say things clearly and calmly and gently and be quite to the point, when our nervous system senses danger, it actually shuts down a lot of our ability to think clearly and to think big picture, and it moves into kind of like a survival mode. And so we end up in a space where our tone is different or our words come out different. And that actually speaks louder a lot of the time to our partners than what we're actually saying, what we're trying to say. And so even just our physical body can actually make it difficult for us to say things in the way that we would intend for them to come out. And part of that also means then that a lot of the time when you're in that space, your brain can go blank in terms of the words you want to say. Your brain can go blank in terms of what you're trying to raise or the examples of what you're trying to raise. And it can end up coming out in a much more clunky way, and you don't have the right words. And sometimes literally the word will be out of your head, and you'll just be like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. So I'll find something that's nearby and it's not even exactly what you're trying to say. So this whole physical nervous system experience doesn't just affect your tone and how you come across. It actually affects your ability to think clearly about the words that are coming out of your mouth before they come out of your mouth too. And if you mix that with growing up in a home where emotions weren't expressed clearly, or you don't have that emotional vocabulary to name how you're feeling and to understand the layers that go into that, then that kind of mix can be even more a recipe for disaster, because you're mixing that with a nervous system that's in panic and it all just comes out. You might also be somebody who bottles up instead of expressing things along the way. This is something that I struggle with a lot, and a lot of people do. You don't express the things as they come up because it's complicated and layered. And so then you end up bottling. And then when it does come out, instead of it just being a comment about that instant or a response or a conversation you're bringing up in that moment, it has all these layers to it, all this stuff that you've bottled up and all this pressure behind it, and it just explodes. All of these things mix into a nice little soup of complication. And the other part that I think is really important, and I think also plays into a lot of these conversations, and definitely for us, is that when we come to raise something, and we had a conversation like this yesterday, we assume context. So we've had this conversation in our head, or we've had these little moments where we're picking up our evidence or we're picking up our thoughts and that sort of thing. And we have this whole story playing out internally for us. And then we come into the conversation. And a lot of us struggle to recognize that we're actually assuming in that process what our partner understands. And so we'll come out with things with a whole story. This is what I was doing yesterday when we were having this conversation, this whole story and these feelings and emotions and all this stuff going on, assuming that Blair understands what I've been thinking about, even though it hasn't been communicated, or Blair understands how I've been feeling about these things, or it's as clear to him, the context that's been going on for me. And that just isn't the case most of the time. And so we come into the conversation already not on the right foot because we've assumed a lot of stuff, a lot of context that we're then projecting. And the other partner, we have no idea really what's going on for them and what they've picked up or what they haven't. And so that just continues to make that gap further and further apart.
Yeah, this is another one of those episodes. I feel like so many of these episodes are very just not targeted at me, because that's not what's happening here. It's like, Blair, this is you. But no, these are genuinely things that I've really wrestled with forever, and especially since being in a relationship, because when you're working on yourself in a relationship, it holds so much more. It's just a different level, and there's a lot more weight in it. But communication has been a huge, huge wrestle. And even to today, it's such a hard thing. And I think there's a number of different levels. One is, the upbringing, the way that we communicate as a family, but also my own processing abilities and what I need to try and get through a thought is really hard. So there's a number of theories. Like, I haven't been tested, but one is, you and I both have been looking at, into this quite a lot, but I potentially have ADHD. And so with that, like I wrestle with a lot of the thoughts that I have and processing them, and I can't just process it and then clearly communicate it. I need to communicate it and process it at the same time. And that's really hard sometimes. So like I've been, recently, like we had a conversation about what I've been trying to do, because I know that when we were together, I was just very blunt. I was just like, this is it. This is what it is. I'm just processing, putting it out there. And I would have little understanding of how that communication was affecting you. But for me, I'm like, I just got to get it out of my head. And it was more focused on the way that I was communicating than the way you were receiving. Over time, it's been that real wrestle of, all right, cool. Well, I know how I typically and naturally process. That has been harmful. So now I've got to take a breath. I've got to just take time. I don't respond in the moment. I pick that and I try and like pace it out over time to try and do the processing as much as I can internally. And then it might get to a point where I talk to you and I might say, look, I'm still processing this. I don't have it. I just need to get this out of my head so I can move forward with it. I'm like, I'll be clear, like, I might be blunt, but it's not I'm genuinely trying to just get this thought out of my head and I can't do it internally. So really taking you on that journey has been something I've really tried to focus on rather than just saying it. The other thing too, and this is what, again, it's still an area of struggle for me, right? It genuinely is. Like recently, I knew you were struggling with something, and rather than me just coming straight out and saying it, even working with you on this sort of stuff over time, I've got these different touch points. So I'll be like, all right, how are you feeling? And then you might share that, or you might be like, I don't know. I'm like, all right, well, what are you thinking? But I don't do all this at once. I'll pace it out. I'm like, all right, but what are you thinking? And then you might actually be like, well, I'm actually thinking something. I don't know what to feel yet, or vice versa. And then from those, like getting that gauge, then I'll, talk to you about something. Yeah, but it's still that wrestle. It's not that perfect science. The big part has been going on that journey with you though. Like for me to just do that on my own, I've found extremely hard, because I can't gauge the way that you receive something if I'm not working on it with you. Does that make sense? Like I might be trying to, you gave good feedback yesterday. You're like, well, I don't know. That's what you're doing, right? Like you didn't know that was my approach. You didn't know that's what I was trying to do. You didn't know of my intentions. All you saw was this awkward random questions coming out there, or these suggestions or whatever else with no context. So for you, it wasn't being received in the way that I was meaning it. Yeah. Because I was trying to do it internally. I was trying to do it on my own.
Well, that's the assumption part that I was talking about, where you assume that people have the same context that you do. So we were talking about how you were drinking.
That's your coffee. I don't want your coffee. I want my coffee.
We were talking about how I've been struggling and you've been trying to make it so that I don't have to worry about so much stuff around the house. And so you've been doing all of this stuff around the house with the kids on holidays, trying to keep it nice and calm. And then the other day you were like, if you can just clean the benches, I'll do all the other stuff. And for me, because I didn't know that's what you were doing, all I saw was I'm struggling. And then Blair is like super cleaning and getting the kids to clean. And then he's asked me to clean if you can just do the benches. So to me, and this is my assumption part of it, was like, okay, he's frustrated because I'm not pulling my weight. And he's asked me to do the benches. It wasn't like, you only need to do the benches. Like from his perspective, he's like, that's all I will ask for help for, and I'll do everything else. From my perspective, it was like, he's been busy, and then he's come and asked me if I can do the benches. So he's frustrated because I'm not doing this stuff. And this is just such a classic the stories you bring to things, or the context you bring. And I was projecting my assumptions of what he was feeling, but he was having this whole process and just not sharing what it was. And so he was assuming that I understood that context. And so that's how easy it is to miss each other. And then you add all the other layers into it, like how you're feeling and your experiences and blah, 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 blah. And it was interesting. Yeah, it was interesting to see how that had played out. The different stories that we project on, or the different ways. And that wasn't a badly communicated thing, just to be clear. Like this wasn't even a clumsy conversation. It just shows how easy it is to come across in a way that you don't mean to, or how easy it is to read things in a way that's not intended.
I think it was like less of a clumsy conversation and clumsy approach to the conversation, if that makes sense, because it was clumsy in the end. Like, because in my head, you know, because again, all those assumptions, I came to you, you were working, and I'm like, all right, well, I've got to be very gentle about this because I know how it could come across. And so I didn't give you context. And that was the clumsy part, is I didn't give you context to my question. I just focused on my approach to the question. And that was where, like, in hindsight, I'm like, oh, that makes sense how you felt that. But I was just like, Amy, like, you know, there's no rush. It's just take your time. I will, you know, kids and I are going to do all the other cleaning. I just want you to, if you can just focus on the bench, because I wasn't getting to everything. And I know, like, from a time, like, from previously we've spoken about, you've talked about how clutter and mess like stresses you out. Yeah. I'm like, sweet. Well, we'll take, I know you've been stressed recently. I'm like, oh, we'll take care of that. And my intentions were so, you know, trying to be nice. But again, like when I'm doing that without giving you context, I can see how it looks afterwards. And yeah, that was the clumsy part, is the approach to it, not necessarily the conversation. Because then we had the conversation and then we're like,
yeah. And then the flip side of that is you're trying so hard and it's not your natural, you haven't felt natural in this space. So you're trying extra hard to make sure you're communicating well. And then I'm reacting negatively with my own stories going on. And so then that's like, ugh.
And that's the important part. Like we've talked about, you know, in the intro there, like it's about what's the goal in mind. Because we were getting a little bit frustrated there when we had this conversation because we weren't understanding where the disconnect was. Like I was focusing on, I'm doing these things. And then Amy's like, you didn't tell me you were doing those things. And so there's little frustration there for a little bit. And what's so important here is, like, again, I can focus on, in this argument right now, I could focus on my perspective and actually, no, I'm doing these things. Why can't you just appreciate I'm doing these things? And I wouldn't have the impact that I'd want it to have, right? It'd be more about me being right than being about our relationship growing in this situation, and vice versa. You could have focused more on you being right from your perspective than understanding what was my intention there. Like, and that's where the strength really comes into with these communication tools and tricks and tips and stuff like that. Really trying to get to that understanding, that attitude of curiosity towards the situation rather than assuming the other person's just intentionally doing wrong by you. Yeah.
And that's really the heart of it, is if our intention as a couple is to become stronger and is to, like we've talked about this, 5 years down the track, 10 years down the track, where do we want to be? And if that's to be closer and stronger, then these things are important to focus on. And that should be a filter to how we have those conversations or how we approach these comments that we make. We want the other person to succeed. It's not just about we want to succeed or we want to feel heard, which is important. Like, it's important to feel heard and important to be able to express how you're feeling. But it's not, if that is your only goal, is to make sure they know how you're feeling versus make sure they know how you're feeling, but make sure you're bringing a focus to help them succeed and help you guys succeed together. Then you're going to miss the mark. It's not going to be easy to work on these things. It's not going to be easy to strengthen this muscle. And if you do want that, if that is your goal, then it will be. That can be your focus. And that's a good filter and a good kind of compass about how you're going with these things and where you might need to put a little bit more intentionality around strengthening. So Blair also has, like, he's very, like, straightforward, and he's worked really, really hard on that. And you've gotten really good at that. Like, I think, like, when we were together, we were doing the internship together.
When we first got together.
Sorry, you said that earlier as well. Yeah, and I thought the exact same thing. But when we first got together, we were doing the internship, and it wasn't just in our communication. It was like leading other people or that sort of thing. You struggled to not just say what you wanted to say. And your approach tended to be either you say what you want to say, or you avoid it altogether and you just go fix the thing yourself. It wasn't much of like a fostering that conversation back and forth. But then since then, like, I don't think people these days that you work with would have the same experience at all with you. I think that
sometimes they will.
Sometimes, but not to the same extent. It is something you have strengthened a ton. And so that's a really good example of you can build these skills.
Absolutely.
And not just like that, but like use of language. You've also built that hugely over the time we've known each other. And that's through a lot of different things. Your vocabulary and your use of language is so much more strengthened now just through repetition and practice than it was.
And intentionality. And that's the thing is like, you know, I feel like a lot of times we look at these things and like look at these areas in our lives. We're like, oh, I wish I didn't struggle with that or whatever. But like, unless we actually are intentional with those things, and the beauty of it is I get to work on that with you. Like, it's not just on me. And that's the beauty of working through these things as a couple. It's, you definitely can work on them. You're not stuck in those things. So and that's where we want to bring that hope into relationships as well. You know, there's such a cancel culture, even in relationships these days, of like, well, they're not serving me now, so this isn't a good relationship with me. It's like, actually, that's not true. You know, like you can work on things and you just need that intentionality. And sometimes there's a lot of hurt and pain that's in such circumstances, but that's where there's professional help to actually help you through that. But a lot of times it's just the commitment together, that attitude of curiosity, digging deeper, and that attitude of intentionality.
And grace for each other.
And grace, and that commitment to grow with each other.
And no relationship that you observe that you think, oh, that's so strong, look how well they work together. None of those people got there magically. Like none of them just fell into this easy pattern without any work. Like those are the kind of relationships that they've put in the work. And I struggle when I feel like I'm constantly being like, it's hard work, because that makes it sound depressing and maybe not worth it, but it's so worth it. And it is hard work in terms of like it's intentional work. Yeah. But it's the same with anything. Like it's the same. We've spoken about this all the time. Like we invest in our professional world. Like we invest in training there. We invest in practicing there.
And a lot of the times they're hard work, but the results from the hard work that you put into it's exactly the same in your relationship. You know, the hard work you put into it, you're going to see those results. You're going to see that strength in the way that you guys communicate, the way that you guys operate together, the way you raise a family together, and impact other people's lives around you together. All those things are through the hard work that you put into it.
Yeah, the worth it hard work that it's funny that just kind of for some reason this area of life feels like it should just be automatic when everything else is not. So anyway, that's the context of this. This is very relevant for us. It's very relevant for other people, and it can play out in different ways. And there can be so many reasons why you might struggle to say things clearly. You're not alone in that. It's normal. You can work on it. And now we're going to talk about some of the ways that you can work on it, the ways that you can start to see, implement a change in this space to bring about more constructive conversations.
So we're going to get into some practical tips in a second, but I just wanted to take a moment and pause and talk more about how, you know, we invest in our careers, we invest in our training, and we also spoke about the importance of investing in your own self and your own relationship, in your own self for your relationship even. And so what we do, we want to be more than just a noise. We want to be more than just sounds and more voices speaking into the internet. We actually want to be providing resources to actually help you work through those things. And like you would invest in your work, we want you to invest into your relationship. So go onto our website, honeymoonintochat.com, and there's a bunch of free resources on there for you to download and work through together as a couple that actually pair up with these episodes themselves. Another thing that we do as well, or well, Amy does coaching for women. So if you want to actually work through these things, if you're feeling stuck on some of these things, reach out as well. And Amy would love to connect with you and go on this journey with you. You're not alone, and we want to support you in any way that we can. Yeah. Great. Let's get into the tips.
Alrighty. So these are ways you can start to build that muscle of saying things more clearly. Let's just call it that. One is, and this is really important for learning how to communicate across the board, not just in your relationship, is being okay with that clumsy practice, that clumsy draft of what you're trying to say. And so if you've got something you need to say to your partner and you have a pattern of it not coming out the way you want, just say it, as in practice it to yourself, write it out to yourself, and start to get through that clumsy draft, because sometimes that's where we get blocked, is just not even getting it out in the first place. Practice it out loud to yourself or on paper and see what it looks like, and then workshop that until you feel better about what you're saying. And the more you practice it, the smoother it will come out. And we do this all the time on the podcast. If you saw our bloopers, you'd see how many times we repeat things before we say them sometimes, because it doesn't come out naturally. What? That's ironic. because it does take practice sometimes. And especially if this is something that you've struggled with in the past. So you could say or write what you really want to say, and then ask yourself, how would this land? Or how can I adjust this and make it a little bit more gentle or a little bit more me focused? And then another part of that is actually practicing saying that out loud to yourself in the mirror, or saying it out loud on a voice memo or something like that. And if it's a really serious conversation, saying it to someone, like workshopping it with someone that you trust and that's a wise input into your life is good too. But saying these things out loud too, because it's one thing to see it written down. It's a whole other thing to actually verbalize it and have it come out naturally as possible. So just practice. I know that sounds simple, but it's something that we don't do very often. And it's something that can really change how you're communicating about these things, at least by bringing you some more clarity before it comes out of your mouth. Another thing is, if you've got this pattern where you're saying things in a way you don't intend, call it for what it is. Be honest with that and find some sentence starters that work well for you to sort of break the ice and set the intention of what you're trying to say before you come out with the clumsy sentence, and helps your partner understand where you're coming from instead of them just having this cold, clumsy sentence sent to them. So you can say something like, this might come out clumsily or awkwardly, but it's really important. I want to say it. I want to get it out. Or you can say, can I try to say something and you let me know how you receive it? So then you could then say the clumsy thing and they can respond, and you can say, literally repeat to them, what did you take from that? Like, what do you take from this? How does this make you feel? That sort of thing.
And don't just come out and say that, because again, if you're not on the same page as each other on this approach as well, the other person could still be offended by it. So use this as an example. Use this podcast as an example. Say, and don't do it in the heat of a moment as well, right? If you're trying to get a point across, don't use it as a tool. What I want to encourage you is, like, outside of that moment, use it as a tool to work on it together. You could listen to this episode together, or just if you've got a specific point that Amy's bringing up that stood out to you, bring that. It's like, hey, I genuinely struggle with communication, and just, I'm being blunt, and I struggle with this. I'm really trying to work on it. How about we try this next time or something? Like, prime each other first, like prep each other, commit to that together. That's going to help that flow so much better. So then next time it comes up, you're going to be like, hey, remember how, I mentioned this thing about how I'm just going to share it. I just want you to know how it makes you feel so I can work on it. And you're prepping each other beforehand. You're not just doing it in the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can also say, you can come out and say, I have an important conversation that I need to have. Do you mind if we take a few moments, like after the kids go to bed or something? So you're setting the intention for what's coming up.
Yeah.
And then you could start it by saying, this might feel clumsy, but I'm just going to try and get it out because it's important and I want to communicate it. So be gracious with me. And then also something like, I don't know how to say this gently. I don't know how to say this in the best way. So this is what I'm saying. And that doesn't excuse you to then be like, you're really annoying, or something that's like quite inflammatory. It doesn't excuse what you're now about to say, but it does add a little gentle buffer in terms of setting your partner up, understanding where you're coming from and what you're struggling with in terms of working on it, and allowing a little extra grace, hopefully, in the process so you can get to the heart of what you're trying to communicate about. As long as your intention is then the same thing, to be kind and gentle in what you're expressing as much as you possibly can. So leading with intent is really important as well. So that's just saying, I'm trying to express something that's important to me, but I don't know how to word it. Leading with your intention and showing a bit of vulnerability there can really help break that ice and help set your partner up with the right headspace for these conversations. Another thing you can do, and this is, I think, another show of vulnerability in a relationship, is this. It's one thing how you have the conversation, and then it's another thing how you follow up that conversation. And we've talked about that a lot too. Like, a lot of the time, the biggest change comes from the follow-up conversation, not the actual initial moment. And so one thing that I think helps us feel a lot more softly towards each other is that we do have that follow-up conversation, and we're able to workshop how the initial conversation went down. And like, we even did that today in this episode. We talked about our conversation yesterday. And I think if you start to open yourself up to feedback down the track with your partner, and maybe the first conversation was clunky, but then you come back to it and you say, how could I have said this differently? Like, how could I have more gently or more appropriately communicated what I was trying to say, and let them give you feedback on that. For one, it shows your vulnerability and willingness to learn and willingness to come back to things, even though it's uncomfortable. two, it allows them to workshop it with you back and forth and either give you tips that might be really, you might not have thought about, or help them understand how complicated it was for you. So it's a nice, gentle reflection back that allows a lot of growth, and probably even more so than the initial conversation would. This is one thing I think that Blair's really well implemented over the last few years, is listening to people that talk the way you want to talk. So you've really being inputted into by people that you respect. So either people in real life that have, you know, they're a little bit further down the track, they've got a bit more experience, and you respect them, and you've put yourself in a position of being teachable, mentored by them, or even listening to resources that help you. So like even just your language use. So like when you were at university and stuff and trying to learn how to use English well, which I'm not doing right now, but you started trying to read a lot, and you've like went from not reading at all to reading tons. You still read, and you're still into books. And I feel like just fiction, like not deep nonfiction philosophical books or anything like that, just fiction, but seeing how people use English and allowing that to be something that's strengthened for you has been a game changer.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I had a mate who's an English teacher, which was huge. Yeah. So he actually helped me. I remember, so when I went to college, so this is later on in life, right? Like I'm a school dropout. I left school at like 15, moved out of home, like all this sort of stuff. And it was late 15, so I was nearly finished year 10. And that's a whole story in itself. But, and so when I went to college, I think it was like 22 or 23 or something.
It was after we were married. Yeah. So yeah, 25. 25,
wow. And I hadn't done, I hadn't really done assignments. I hadn't really done essays. I did tests in primary school and stuff, but they were never like at this level. And so I went to my mate who was an English teacher. I'm like, dude, I need help, man. And he actually helped me. I think I was getting like passes in my assignments when I first started, and I started like working with him. I went to high distinctions, and it was really, really awesome. So again, I think a big thing that we need to overcome is maybe the pride or the embarrassment that we might face. I've had a lot of that over my life, but I think what the shift was when I started to realize I didn't have to be stuck in my ways. I'm like, I don't want to be. Like, I want to grow. I want to do this. And so, again, that's down to the intentionality again. And you don't always have, the opportunity to have an English teacher friend.
Yeah.
And, your struggles might be different, but there's so many resources out there. Yeah. And again, we put a lot of those onto our website. Amy does do those coachings to help with those resources. You're not alone. Your wrestles won't be unique to you. And there are a lot of things out there to actually help you do it, to work through it.
And with all of this stuff, there's a layer of vulnerability. You have to be okay with the fact that it's not a strength of yours and that you want to learn. And you have to be okay putting yourself in that position so that you can learn, or you're never going to learn. Like, you'll stunt yourself there. So even if it's things like listening to podcasts like this one, that's one of the reasons we do this podcast, is to just display different ways of workshopping things. So the more people are listening, the more it's like subconsciously stretching how they'll navigate conversations too. And there's a range of resources out there that you can implement to help you learn from the people around you, or the people that you're listening to the content of, to express yourself with more clarity and more depth. And whatever it is you're trying to be better at, find people that are doing it the way you really wish you could, and then surround yourself with that content or with them. And then the last thing I'll say as well to these practical tips is notice what has worked well in the past. So if you have a conversation and you're like, actually, that was pretty good, notice, like, just be like, what was good about that? Why did it work better that way? Why did how I said it? Wow. Honestly, my English is so bad. It's the irony. Listen to what I mean, not what I'm saying. Notice how the way you've said it has worked well with your partner, and what it is that was different about that. And just try to take notes. And so we've had this, and we have it all the time in our conversations, where we're like, oh, Amy doesn't do well with this, or Blair doesn't do well with this. And it's just, you start to know each other more and more and more, and you won't ever be perfect at it. But the more you understand how your partner receives things, the easier it will be to just naturally communicate with them in that way.
Yeah.
And you do this, again, naturally in life outside of relationships. So we do this around school or around work. There's a way that you communicate with your boss that you wouldn't communicate with other people. And that usually it's more respectful, or it's not using certain language or stuff. We do train ourselves to communicate in an appropriate way with certain people. And so we can do this. It's just something that I don't think we think too clearly about when it comes to relationships for some reason. So a few ways that, just to show an example of how you might reword things too, is you're asking yourself what we want our partner to receive out of this thing too. So before you enter in these conversations, ask yourself what your goal is out of this conversation. Like, what is the heart behind what I'm about to say to this person? And this is an important question to ask, because sometimes the biting, clumsy comment isn't actually for them and for their betterment at all, or for even the betterment of the relationship. It's just like an expression, or like almost like an attack or a weapon that we're using. And that's an important thing to recognize, because that's not a constructive communication tool. You can switch your heart to be like, no, I do want us to be closer together. Then that will change how you communicate. I do want my partner to succeed, and I want our relationship to succeed. And that is my goal. Then that'll help you identify how you should word things. So for an example, if you were to be a bitey, passive aggressive, like we spoke about in the last episode, using kind of jabs or jokes to express how you're feeling, you might say something like, wow, thanks for the help. But what you're actually trying to communicate, instead of just using a little like pew bullet or arrow or something, how's the English going? What you're actually trying to communicate is, I'm actually feeling overwhelmed and I'd love some help. Can we talk about that? That's the heart behind that thing. When you can have that as your focus, your relationship is your focus, your partner is your focus. Instead of saying, wow, thanks for the help, you'll be like, oh, actually, that's not going to get me anywhere. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Can we have a conversation? I need some help. Or you could, another example is, you never listen. Instead of you never listen, I'm feeling unheard and I would really like to feel more connected. So there's just little shifts that when you've got that filter and that lens of, we want to be stronger together, it helps you identify what those shifts might be. If you're stuck up in your brain about, I just want to get it out, you're not going to have that natural filter going over what you're trying to say. Another really important thing we've spoken about is your nervous system. Like, so when you come into conversations a lot of the time, especially if it's a like pretty intense one or the circumstances aren't great, your nervous system is not your friend, unfortunately. It can really shut down your ability to speak clearly. And so if you know you're about to raise something complicated, or if you know you're about to respond in a conversation in a bitey way, try to regulate your own body. Take a deep breath and exhale through your nose. Drop your shoulders. That's one big thing. Like, I often, whenever I hear these things like on reels or something, I'm scrolling, they'll be like, unclench your jaw and drop your shoulders. Every time my jaw is clenched and my shoulders are like whatever this is. Hunched, tight. So like clench, drop your shoulders, just breathe. Just relax. Basically breathe, drop your shoulders, unclench your jaw, your hands too. That's Blair. I see when he's tense, he like does a little fist. Yeah. Relax your hands. Start to like notice what's happening for you physically. Place your hand on your chest. We said this last episode as well. That helps to really ground you. Helps you feel your heart, helps you feel your breathing, helps you feel grounded, and adjust your posture so that you're feeling more able to enter the conversation gently. So you're in a good headspace, and all of these things help to signal to your nervous system that you're safe, and that helps bring clarity. Even just a breath when you're finding yourself in these like bitey little back and forths, taking a deep breath so oxygen goes to your brain. It feels like when I do this, it feels like my brain opens up and it just allows more clarity. It just allows bigger picture thinking. It allows you to say things more gently. It allows you to think about things outside of your own survival in that moment. And another really important thing too is when you're going to communicate about something, if you just come in to the situation, you're like, blah, 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 blah. Actually, this happened to us the other day because I had just woken up and Blair had been awake for a little while and he was thinking about a lot of stuff before I got up. And then I hadn't even had my coffee. I literally was making my coffee as he was saying these things. And it wasn't bad, but he was just like saying a lot. Yeah. It was about finances. What were we talking about? No, it was about the podcast. About the podcast. All these ideas he had for the podcast and like, social media and stuff and just things we need to get like on top of because I haven't been. And I was just like half there. And then you notice, you're like, sorry, I shouldn't, you're like, you've just woken up. I shouldn't probably have dumped all of this on you. And so that's a good example of notice the tone that your partner's coming from. Like what tone do they have right now? What circumstances or context do they have? Yeah. Because you can come in ready for this conversation and they're just like, whoa, like I'm stressed because the kids are like going berserk around me and I can't even think right now.
Yeah.
Or I'm just walked out from work and my brain is like full. And I do this all the time to Blair. Like I'm just like, blah, 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 and he's come out from like meetings and meetings and meetings and all this strategy and that kind of thing. Notice the tone your partner's in and then adjust or re-time things. Be like, maybe we'll come back in 10 minutes, or can we go for a walk, or something that like doesn't just dive right into this thing you're trying to communicate, because all of that adds to the clumsiness of what you're communicating. You're not matching tone. So either if they're really calm and like peaceful and you come in like rah, like because you're worked up about something, you notice, take a second to notice before you do that, and they're calm, try and match their tone. Like try to calm it down a bit, do those grounding things, be like, okay, this is something I've been thinking about. If you notice actually they're like on edge, don't match their tone. That won't work.
Yeah.
Take a sec, like just recognize where they're at and allow that to be a buffer before you come in just adding to that stuff. So that's an important context cue in terms of how to navigate these conversations. So those are some practical ways to navigate these things. If you find yourself in these repeating patterns of not communicating the way you wish you could, not getting your meaning out, or coming across with a meaning that actually is not your intention, these are ways you can navigate how to strengthen that muscle. And I think the kind of core point of it is have your partner in mind, like have them be a focus for you, and allow yourself to be vulnerable in that space. Allow yourself to, even if this has been a pattern for you for a while, allow yourself to come back and say, I recognize I have not been communicating the way that I wish I could. And I'm sorry for how that might have made you feel. I'm going to put work into this or something, because that brings them on your side straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. So
find a little practical thing that you can implement today, just a little bit of a reality check corner, is think about something that you want to communicate with your partner and write it out in the way you would usually communicate it. And then I want you to go through and try and see how you can rewrite it. This is just purely for an example. You don't even need to have this conversation right now if you don't want to, but how can you rewrite it or reword it to focus on your intention, to focus on your feelings rather than like a criticism of your partner, to be more kind and more gentle, and removing any space for assumptions that you might be bringing in as well. Just workshop that little thing that you want to communicate and see how much can change in the way that you're saying the thing, and then practice it out loud as well. See how that changes it as well. Just practice these tools because it helps you recognize where there might be an area you want to strengthen. There we go, guys. No more jabby comments.
Let's be nice.
Let's be nice.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. Catch you next week.
See ya.
Good chat.